Hey there, tubers. Today I'm making a video on what I hope is just a belt replacement on this 2013 John Deere Gator RSX850i. It started making some squealing sounds out of the belt area, and I have a heck of a time getting it out of drive gear. So I'm hoping it's just the belt. It could be the clutches. But as we delve into this, I'll find out. So like I said, this is 2013. It's got 300 and some hours on it, a couple thousand miles. And I've heard varying stories on the life expectancy of the drive belts on this. But this will be my first time replacing one, and hopefully it goes fairly smooth. But there's not a lot of videos or anything out there on this, so I figured, what the heck, I'll do a follow along with me type deal. So I'll get this in the garage and start tearing it apart and see what we can make of it. So I'll start it up, and hopefully you can kind of hear and see what I got going on here, and see why I think it's just a drive belt. But that's in neutral, and get it in gear. You can kind of hear a squealing going on. It doesn't really want to stop when you let off the gas. It just kind of keeps going. So, but we'll find out here shortly what that is. So here we are. The first step is to actually clean this thing. It was pretty filthy, and most of the stuff in the cab here has to come out. So I gave it a quick swabbing, and now I'm ready to go. So you tilt the seats forward and then come down below here, and there's 4 10mm size bolts in each seat, so 8 bolts total. I'll pull those out and yank the seats out, and then I think we have to remove this bracket, so I'll figure out what I got to do there after I get the seats out. Alright, got the seats out fairly easy. I don't think that the seats are going to go back in quite as easy as they came out. They're kind of at an awkward angle, and they're fairly heavy, so probably end up being a two-man job putting them back in. But this just turns up, comes right off. So you take each one of the sides seat plates off, then you come down here, and these are Torx 25s, and there's 7 of them. And then this cover comes off, and I'll have to pop this shift cover off so we can get this off and go on to the next step. So I'll pop those 7 screws out and shift handle and carry on. Alright, so this cap here, just stick a screwdriver, something narrow, in between, pops the top off. Gives you access to that bolt right there, and that's a 15mm. Get that out of there. And this should just come right off, and then we can just pull this whole thing up and out of here. That looks like it's going to take 2 hands, so I'll be right back. So now with that removed, the next step is to remove this whole air intake plenum. And because I've got this plastic rear window and dust protector, I'm going to have to take both those off. Pretty simple, it's just velcroed on. And then once I do that, I'll pull all these straps, which will open up where the air filter is, and remove the air filter, and then will be some screws to take the bottom half of this plenum off. So I'll get going on that. Be right back. So I got that back piece out. Now you just pop this off. That exposes your air filter and CVT filter. And obviously I've been in the dirt, so they're plenty filthy, but just pull the filters, and then there should be some screws down here in the bottom and a couple here on top. I'll pop those off and pull that. Okay, so instead of staying consistent, they now using T30s up here. So there's three, one there, there, and there. I'll be able to pull that off. Okay, so you just pull that off. That exposes this clamp here, which you'll take that off. And then the one screw up here is back to a T25. And then you should be able to pull this whole thing out here. Okay, so I got that hose clamp loose, got that screw loose. Then you'll have to come around on the back side, and on each side there's 3 T25 screws back here, each side of it. And then after that you come to the front and you've got 5. So there's one up top, 2, 3, 4, and 5 right here, and then one push pin, and that's on each side. So they've got plenty of screws holding stuff together here, and then theoretically this thing should come off. Alright, I'll get those loosened up. Be right back. Alright, so everything's loose. This thing should come right out. And apparently it will. Just like that. Alright, we'll see what's next. Alright, back over on the driver's side here. You need to remove the cotter pin and linkage from the shift lever. So 2 cotter pins, and it should pop right out of there. Once you get that out, then the fuel tank vent hose, you need to pull it off of the seat frame here. Then you'll go over to the passenger side, and there's 2 13mm size nuts there, and you'll pull those nuts out and then the bolts out. And then over here on the driver's side, you just take these 2 nuts off. You do not pull the bolts out because there's really no access to get in there. So you pull them out, you're probably gonna have to pull the fuel tank to get them back in. So I'll get those few little things off, and we'll move on to the next one. Okay, so I got those bolts out. The next will be, there's a bolt in here and one over here, and they're going to be kind of a pain to get to, but they're up underneath, and they're 10mm. Once I get those 2 out, then I'll disconnect the seatbelt warning wire, and then take these 2 big bolts here, they're 18mm, take those out, and then this whole plate should just come right out. So I'll get those loosened up and we'll see what happens. Alright, so I got those bolts out. These upper ones, they were in there good. I don't know what they were torqued to, but I had to put a breaker bar and a cheater bar on it to even bust those loose. So the seat belts were definitely secure. So I think, yep, it just slides right on out. One piece again. And then that opens it up right to the clutch area itself. Then down in there, the front drive line, there's a snap ring and a roll pin that I'll have to pull. And once I get down in there, I'll show you a better picture. Okay, so hopefully you can see this, but there is a snap ring right here. And of course, the clip is on the bottom, so I'll have to spin that around. And then right underneath it, in there, is a roll pin going through. So once I get that snap ring off, I'll have to tap that roll pin out, and then that drive line should just come right off. Alright, well, I'll do that and get right back to you. Alright, so all that snap ring's doing is protecting that roll pin from coming out. So I got it off to the side and was able to punch that roll pin out. So now I should just be able to put a little pry on here and get that drive line to come off. Looks like it's moving, so that's a good sign. I'll get that popped off and we'll go on to the next step. Alright, so with that disconnected, there are 10 8mm bolts. So there's one down right here across the top, then you've got 3 here around the input shaft, and then there's going to be one down underneath here and one underneath over in here, which should be a joy to get to. So I'll get those all taken off and see if I can get that cover out. Alright, once again, engineering and reality didn't seem to come together. Down in here, I don't know if you can see it, but there's one of the bolts. I was able to get it out, but it's taken me over an hour, and simply because there is absolutely no place to get in there. And as bad as that was coming out, I'm not sure how I'm going to get it back in there. And the same thing goes for over on this side. Right down, I don't know, I'll try and get this in there. Down in there, same thing. Just almost impossible to get to. But other than that, I got them all out. And now I'm going to see if I can actually pop this cover off. I'm not sure what it's going to take here. I might have to pry a little bit. It's never been off before, so it might be a little stiff. So give me a second and I'll see what I can do. Alright, so I ran into a few snags here. First one is, when they said 10 bolts around it, they meant around it. And then they didn't include these 3 when they said 10, so there's 13 total. The bottom ones are spaced out just like these upper ones, except for there's a cross member down here, and you cannot get your hands in there to do any work. So I was able to get an extension with a swivel on the end of it in there, and I used a mirror, got it on the bolts, and was able to get them all loose and get them out of the holes, but they all fell down into the belly pan. So once I get this cover off, I'll be able to retrieve them, but I, for the life of me, have no idea how I'm going to be able to get those back in. I don't know whether I'll have to silicone them into the socket and try and fish them in, or what. But I can tell you that I'm not happy about the way this was designed. The second snag I ran into is this drive line. They said that it needs to be removed. Well, they don't say anything about how to remove it, and this is as far forward as it goes, and you can't get this cover off with it sitting where it's at. right there's as high up as it comes. So I'm basically gonna have to pull the floorboards up to get that driveline out. And nowhere in the instructions does it say that. So there's 10 Torx 25s around this thing. I'm going to take those out, pull this floorboard up, see what I got under there, and I'll get right back with you. Alright, so this back piece just had 2 screws holding it. I thought it was all one piece, but it's not. So once you pop that out, it shows you that there's another 3 screws to pull, and I'll get those pulled out and hopefully this will come out. Otherwise it might be pinched between this side piece, which in case I'd have to take all the screws out of it, but we'll find out here shortly. Well, here we are. I am going to have to pull an additional 4 bolts on each side to get these side panels to come over so that floor can come up. So I'll get that and we'll see what troubles I run into next. Well, what an utter nightmare this has turned into. This pan, I got it loose, but it doesn't want to come out. The pedals are in the way, and just the way it's in here, I'm not sure how they got it in. But I was able to, since it is loose, to get it up, and I was able to get this driveline up and out of the way a bit, and had to do a little dance with it. So started off in the middle, was able to get the cover started off, then I had to move the driveline off to the side here to get this side of it off. And of course you've got your coolant lines right there, so I had to wiggle and pry because they're wedged right against the lines there to get it out. They also didn't tell you in the manual that you needed to take the fuel filter off its mounts to get it out of the way. So after doing that, fiddling with the driveline and the coolant lines, I was able to get it out. But I am more than frustrated with the design of this. I really enjoyed this machine. It does exactly what I need it to do, and it looks good doing it. But the sheer nonsense of how they put this thing together, I don't know that I'll do another clutch. I'll probably just get rid of it before I have to do another belt or clutch work on it. And you know, we're already halfway to a fuel filter, so I'm going to change it right now, just because it's such a pain to get to all this. But I'm going to check the clutches out, make sure it's good. Belt looks good to me, but it might be a little glazed. I'm not sure why it's not wanting to go in and out of gear and why it's making that squealing sound. So do a little more investigating here and see what I can come up with. Alright, so I got the belt off, and that was a pain in the butt to go along with everything else that's happened on this machine. I checked the belt out. It wasn't glazed, looked really in great shape. So I came down here to this bearing, and this bearing is supposed to spin freely and smoothly, and it does neither. So I'm guessing that's time for a clutch, which I would not have expected at this point in ownership, but I guess it is what it is, and I'll be pulling that off and seeing if somebody can rebuild it or just buying a new one. I'm not sure yet. So I'll see if I can get this broke loose and get it out of there and carry on. Alright, so here we are, a couple days later now. I did get this broke loose. This is a 15 millimeter, and it spins clockwise to loosen. So got that loosened, pulled it out, and then I went to John Deere, and of course they said the puller tool was on back order till fall, which isn't going to work for me. So after a ton of research, I found a company called EPI Performance, and they make their own tool to fit this clutch. It's called a PCP20, and their website's epiperformance.com. And there's the tool. Unfortunately, it was about twice the price of what John Deere wanted, but they had it, and they could get it to me in 2 days. So that is worth something to me. So what I'll do is I'll get this put in here, and then we'll get that screwed in tight, and it'll basically pull this clutch off the engine crank. And then once I do that, I'll check it out myself, tear it down, and see what it looks like it needs. And since the tool itself is on back order, I'm guessing that parts for this are probably on back order, which if they are, then I guess I definitely will be getting a new clutch, because they do have those available. And it has changed part numbers, so I'm guessing that they've kind of outdated this one. But I'll get it pulled off, and we'll go from there. And this is a 19 millimeter, just in case you needed to know. So I got the tool in there, and it's up against the crank. So before I start reefing on this, person needs to put a pry bar or something in between to keep the clutch from spinning. And just kind of watch out for when you shove it in there. Make sure you don't bind it up on the spring in there or anything else. But keep it from spinning. It should break free, and I'll see how hard that is. Well, that took a couple of good pulls on it, and boy, she popped right free. So there she is in all her glory. It is a bit dirty, so I'm sure that didn't help it. But I'll check out everything in it, make sure that there isn't more than just that sleeve bearing down there, and I'll report back. Okay, so I got this out, and these are 3/8 size nuts or bolts, and this thing is filthy. I don't know what to say about that, other than apparently that compartment is not as sealed as they claim it to be. I'm sure this is what did it in. I took it out and blew it with the air compressor, and it took me about 5 minutes of just a cloud of crap coming out of it, and there's still a bunch. So when you get this top piece loose, you need to look for and make sure it's marked with an X, and down here it's marked with an X, and that is part of the balancing of this. So you got to put it back together with those X's lining up. If you don't have an X, just mark it somewhere, and so that you get it back together properly. So you just pop that off, and you've got your spring, and then some more dirt. Ugh. After even blowing this out, there's still that much in here. But it slides nice and easy, and there's virtually no wiggling in it. So I'm thinking that the only thing wrong is going to be that bearing. So I'll probably pull these out. Can't remember what they're called, but see how they look, and then pull this piece out, and all that should be left is that bearing. So I'll have to break this free here, and then this all should just come right out. So I was able to just hand loosen this. Again, another clockwise thread, and that little retainer is what kind of keeps everything from moving. And I'll pull these dogs out, check them out, and go on to the next step. Alright, so I'm also going to take off the secondary to just check it out, clean it up, make sure everything's working right on it. Again, it's a 15 millimeter, takes this off. This one is normal, so it's a counterclockwise removal, clockwise install. And then it should, once I get that bolt out, this thing should just come right off. It might take a little love tap just to break it loose, but it shouldn't have to be pressed off like the primary was. So I'll get that bolt out and see just how easy that does come off. Alright, so once again the Gator has struck. So you see all this rust that's down in here? I'm not sure why it's rusted, how moisture got in here. I mean, I can only think of two reasons. Either it was rusted at the factory when they put it together, or somehow condensation has gotten in there. But that did not come off as easy as it was supposed to. And what it's done, you've got this baser bushing type thing here. I don't know if you can get the rust, but that is completely corroded in there. And I ended up having to get a puller, and I hooked it on these two ears here and had to put the bolt back in and press against that bolt. And I put enough force on it, I was afraid that I was going to break this, but it didn't, and it finally gave. But I'm going to have to definitely clean that up, and I don't want to put any lube on it just simply because of the belt dust and stuff like that could cause problems. But what a pain. The Gator just doesn't want me to mess with it. What a pain in the butt. So it's been a few days here. I was going to tear this clutch apart and just repair it myself. And I went into the John Deere dealer, told him I needed some parts for it, and they said, well, they do sell those parts, but John Deere has updated the clutch completely, and that they will not sell me the parts for this one. And all I needed was that sleeve in there. You know, I'm not completely rebuilding everything because the weights and the spring and everything else is good. It's just that sleeve. But they would not sell it to me. And their reasoning was that they've had so many problems with these clutches that they cannot guarantee the life of it, or even that it would work as soon as you put it back in. So after discussing it with them, I asked them, all right, well, if I have you guys do all the labor, would you do it? And they said no. And that surprised me. And the service department guy says, we do not have confidence in our abilities to repair this clutch and have it function as it should for any amount of time. And I was a little surprised at them saying that, and I don't know whether I should be happy that they were being honest or upset that these clutches are such a pile of crap that they aren't willing to back them at all. So with that, of course, they're more than happy to sell you the updated clutch, which is what I ended up doing. I bought this one here because obviously I wasn't going to get the parts through John Deere. I could have used an aftermarket company that sold John Deere clutches, but I figured if they're not willing to back it, then maybe there is something to it that I should maybe try the new one. And they told me that this new one is, everything on it is updated. Everything's beefier, and it's just a much better clutch. But there's not much to the clutches, so I'm not exactly sure what they beefed up. But just comparing them side by side here, you can see that this one's definitely lighter. They've trimmed off a bunch of the aluminum to make it lighter. But really, other than that, you know, you've got your sleeve in here. This one spins nice and free. But everything looks the same. In fact, that part number there is the same part number here. So that hasn't changed. Looking at the inserts, they look the same. Obviously, that sleeve has been worn and that one hasn't, but I really don't know what else they could have really improved on. So we'll find out just exactly how long this one lasts. But that was a bit of a shock to me that they weren't willing to sell the parts or even work on that older clutch there. So I'm going to throw this one in. I'm going to keep this old one around just for the heck of it, and maybe if I run across a screaming deal on a sleeve, I'll tear that one apart and just rebuild it to have a spare for the new owners if this clutch, this new one, ever goes out. Because I can tell you what, I will not be doing another clutch in this Gator. So I'll get this thrown in. I'm considering putting a EPI clutch kit in it since everything's out, and if I decide to do that, I'll show you that process. So once again, in John Deere's infinite wisdom, right down in here is a spark plug for one of the cylinders. Now the other one is on the back side here that you can get to if you open the dump bed. But this one, the only way you're getting to it is to tear all that crap out that I've torn out to do this clutch. So, like the fuel filter, I think I'm going to change that while I'm in here and everything's apart. Even though it's way early on the life cycle of it, I really don't ever want to tear all this apart again to get in here. So I'm going to put a new plug in and go from there. I'll do both of them, but definitely this one. Alright, so I did go ahead and order the clutch kit from EPI for the Gator. They make 4 of them, stock tires at and below 3,000 feet, and stock tires 3,000 feet to 6,000 feet, and then oversized tires from 3,000 and below, and oversized tires for 3 to 6,000. As much as I'd like to put bigger tires on this, I think I'm just going to stay with the stock ones, and so I went with the kit that was from 3,000 to 6,000 because we're at 4,500 feet here. So yeah, let's open it up, see what it is. So they've got a pair of springs, and then this should be the secondary clutch helix. And there she is. So yeah, got that, and this one goes in the primary and this one should go in the secondary. So yeah, we got some instructions, and we'll see what it takes to install it. Alright, so I was able to compress this by hand and pull the 6 bolts out. 3/8 will take those out. So then just pull this top off. This spring comes out, and then I was mistaken. The silver one is what goes in the primary, the purple one goes in the secondary. So you just put that back in there, bring this back over, sandwich it together, and get your bolts back in, and primary's done. So I'll get those put back in, and we'll move on to the secondary. Alright, so I got those installed, and these get torqued down to 72 inch-pounds. And one thing you got to make sure of is this one's got an X cast in it, and there's an X cast there. Just make sure those line up and you're good to go. So we'll move on to the secondary and see what that entails. Okay, so you flip the secondary upside down to where you see these the helix and the 4 screws that hold it in. They're T25, so I'll back those out and pull that helix out. Alright, so I got the new spring and helix put on here. I just built a tool to compress it. Once you pull these 4 off, there's just a bearing type thing in there, and put a piece of ready rod through the center and just have it come down and push on that. Compress it enough to pull the snap ring out, and then put the new spring in and put this plate back on, and you're back in business. So I'll get this thrown back in, and we'll move on to the primary. And I forgot to mention that these Torx bolts are torqued to 50 inch-pounds. And then you'll want to come down here and make sure that all the washers that were previously on here are still there, and the count is accurate, because that's for shimming the spacing on the belt. So you want to make sure those are right. As you can see, I've cleaned this up, and I don't think it's going to focus enough, but I have cleaned this one up. So once I slide that on, I'll put the bolt back in, and then that is torqued to 54 foot-pounds. So I'll get that in, and then we should be ready for the primary. Alright, so I got primary and secondary in, and torqued down. Now what I ended up doing was I put the belt on the secondary, and then put the primary through the belt, got it on there, and then slid it on the shaft. Otherwise, it takes a lot of force, and where everything's new, I don't want to mar up anything, so that seemed to work really well, doing it that way. So yeah, now the fun part begins, getting that dust and water cover back on and trying to figure out how to get all the bolts in. So I'll get started on that and see how that goes. Alright, so 3 hours later, I got that cover in. I ended up gluing the screws into the extension and the swivel, and was able to get them in there. And it was a huge pain in the butt. I will not deny that. But it's in. And then I was able to get the Driveline hooked back up. And there's a roll pin. See if this thing will focus on it. You knock that roll pin, and then that snap ring goes over the roll pin to make sure it doesn't come out. So the next thing is for me to put the seat belt brace back in, and then slowly piecemeal this thing back together. Alright, seat belt and seat bottom frame is in. You got the 2 bolts down here, 2 bolts there, a bolt under each of those, and the 2 bolts over there. And then the shifter rod goes down back to the transmission here. And after that, it's time to put the air plenum back on. So I'll get to that and see you in a few. Alright, so everything is back in as it should be. Which, putting it back together wasn't that big a deal. Seemed to go together pretty good. So let's fire it up and see what happens. Well, it started. That's a good thing. Normally this thing was fairly jerky, and I don't remember the exact RPMs that it started moving at, but we'll see what this does. No jerk whatsoever, and just about 2,000 RPMs, maybe a little more. Shift's nice. Seems to be pretty low geared. Not sure why. It seems really low geared to me right now, and I'm not sure whether that's just part of the break-in period or what, but let's see, 2,000 we're not moving, 21 we're just starting to creep, 22, and I'm pretty sure that I was at least time will tell here, I guess. And if anything changes, I'll give you an update. But otherwise, that's the major project that it takes to change a belt and a clutch. If you have any questions or comments, leave them below. I'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.